Hey, we're here and we're back on the podcast with Mr. Jeff Holman from intellectualstrategies.com. And Jeff has quite a few things to say about startup law, IP strategy, and most importantly, having a fractional legal team to help you scale your business. He's changing the way startups do this sort of thing. And so we're going to find out from the source himself about how it's possible for a company such as your own to tap into expert legal advice at key pieces and key points and key times in your without needing a full-time in-house team. And they have this kind of innovative approach where businesses can get exactly the help they need when they need it, and without the hefty overhead helping them navigate everything from early stage challenges to high stakes scaling decisions. That sounds like riveting stuff. I'm excited to jump in and talk with you, Jeff.
I'm glad to be here, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. And so what did I leave out there? I do my best to hype up the audience and get them excited for you, but what are you all about? What has you currently fired up?
My focus has been kind of encapsulated in a phrase that I've used probably for the last 10 or 12 years, and that is innovate with confidence, right? We work with a lot of startups, and I'm passionate about startups. There's chaos, there's energy. I love it. I also love helping clean some of it up because there's a lot of messes that happen. And so my goal personally and in my business has really been to help people innovate with confidence. There's a lot of innovation happening. Why not do it in a more confident way? You know the decisions you're making, and you know where you're going. You know what's coming down the road. And, it's just a better way to do it than to just blindly start firing, selling stuff that's not quite ready. Those types of things that are very common in startups.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of like it's too easy to be too far lopsided. And I was thinking about that idea just this morning, this idea of like having a fast thinker and a slow thinker, right? Having someone that's like full speed ahead, take the risk, do the crazy thing. You have like the Steve Jobs type, and then you also have the Steve Wozniak type to kind of like slow things down and clean up the mess. And it seems like maybe if you have that a pairing in that, and whatever context it has to be, you have the crazy person and the responsible person, then you'd hope that it would somehow like even out or kind of create this path to success. And so like, what does that look like when someone approaches intellectual strategies and they say, hey, we're a startup, it's crazy, there's chaos, we need some structure and order? What do they come to you with? What does that before picture look like?
Oh, I love the kind of visionary integrator contrast that you pose there.
EOS.
Yeah, EOS stuff, right?
Yeah.
When they come to us, they're usually a little late, to be honest. They should come to an attorney a little sooner just to get some guidance. You don't have to pay them a lot of money to get guidance, but you should get some guidance up front. But in reality, what happens is they come and they show up and they're like, I have this skeleton closet full of legal issues that I've kind of been avoiding for the last, I don't know, 6 months, year, 4 years, depends on how long they've been operating. I have this skeleton closet full. Can you help me clean it up? Because I'm starting to lose sleep. I think something's going to blow up. The closet's going to burst. And so that's when a lot of people will call us a little later than they should. But that's the reality of it, because they're so busy doing other stuff that by the time they get around to saying, I just can't sleep anymore, I need to bring on legal, let's clean some of this up. And there are some really common types of things that we see. You could probably guess a lot of them. It's just early stage chaos, right? You form a team without putting all the documents in place. You give away some stock or raise some money without putting all the documents in place. You move fast and break stuff. You start selling things and you don't necessarily know what your exposure is for product liability or things like that. We see a lot of those common things with early stage startups.
And that's okay, right? That they've gotten to the point where they admitted they have a problem and it's time to get help. And you have to wonder, if they were overly careful at the beginning, maybe they wouldn't have had the time left over or the energy or the focus or whatever to kind of break some of those things. But it's reassuring to hear that. But if you've got the mess, you've got the skeletons, it's okay, get help. And sure, you might have to like kind of put a little more speed into things and a little more effort to right the ship, but that's okay. They're approaching someone like you to say, hey, here's the problem I have. I didn't know what I was doing, but now with your help, now we can get to it. And so, I mean, tell me about some of the cleanup that you do. Like you said, there's a lot of common things, but is there like a number one most common thing? Like is, the giveaway, the stock, the most common, or like what kind of typical problems do you solve as far as the cleanup?
Yeah, there's two things that people come to us for initially, typically. One is not as exciting, or it's a different topic, right? It's they come to us because we have a really heavy IP background, so patents for your inventions, trademarks for your brands, and they'll come to us because of that. Maybe they've not quite done that as early as they want. They've launched a brand, they're not sure. They've received a cease and desist letter, perhaps, or the application they DIY filed didn't quite go through, so they'll call us to help clean that up. That's on the IP side. And then the other, it's a really large bucket, but the other one is just lack of proper documentation, whether that's corporate documentation, employee documentation, founder documentation, or investor documentation. Those are probably the biggest buckets that we see. So there's some type of documentation that, fast moving founders just haven't quite put in place.
Okay, so there's the intellectual property and there's the documentation to be had. And then what's that process like? Is it like is it weeks? Is it months? Is it you give it to them and they revise? Is it more collaborative? How do you go about solving some of these problems?
We try to take it a step at a time, because it doesn't really work. As you mentioned before, companies they need to be viable before they can spend all this money on legal, because to spend it on legal without being viable doesn't make any sense. We kind of use a framework that you got to test your market, test your product, and have the freedom to operate your business, which is where we really come in. But if you've tested your product and tested your market and those don't work, freedom to operate that business doesn't make as much sense. So we'll come in and we really try to stage things out. The first thing we like to do is come up with a roadmap, and it's not our legal roadmap first; it's the business roadmap. Tell me where you're headed in the next 12 to 18 months. What are your big milestones? Are you raising money? Are you building your team? Are you, outsourcing something, entering into a strategic partnership? Whatever those big milestones are that you're working towards, we want to work towards those same milestones with you. And so we'll use your roadmap to then link up the legal things that need to happen, and then we'll fit the cleanup stuff in between. Right? If there's maybe a slow month here or there, let's get these documents cleaned up that we know about and haven't been done yet. So unless it's critical life type stuff, the cleanup is usually, I mean, it's been put off for months anyways, right? Us
Yeah.
coming in and saying you got to do it today doesn't really make a lot of sense. We'll do it as fast as we can, and if it's critical life, we'll prioritize it. But it's really the cleanup tends to be just over time, maybe this next 6 to 12 months. Let's get you guys really on track to where you're headed, and but also sync up, watch for, and be aware of the legal issues that track with your upcoming milestones as you're going.
That's logical. Like, where does it fit in the timeline? And then you say, well, do this first and fit this in between these pieces. I like that approach. And so, as far as the actual, like the work you've done, right, the good you've done, like do you have any stories to tell with the names removed, perhaps? Because like sometimes I hear these stories, right, where someone says like, okay, we'll make some app or make some company and we'll do something no one's ever done before, and then there's some weird obscure patent and someone just comes out of nowhere and says, hey, it's time for us to collect on this patent. And they would have had no way of like knowing that like the submarine patent existed. And
Yeah.
so, I
Yep.
mean, I'm sure you've seen some crazy stuff. So what have you dealt with?
We deal with the whole spectrum, really, but sometimes when we step in, some of the big things that we've been able to do is people are looking to raise money, and their documentation, their cap table, which shows all the investors and how much everybody owns, they're just not in place. So that's really an easy fix. Usually, at least from a documentation standpoint, we can get all the documents in place. Usually, there's some tax consequences with it too, but getting that ready for someone to take investment is a quick win that we can deliver. Another quick win that we delivered for one client, they were selling a lot of product on a Shopify account, and they wanted to move on to Amazon. Well, they'd kind of not paid attention to their Amazon prospects for a year or two while they were building up their Shopify site. When we went to Amazon to look at it, there were maybe 30, 35 infringing products, because it was a really good product selling well on their own website. Uh, Other people were capitalizing that on Amazon for the time that they weren't on there. And so when we got on, we went through the brand registry program, we had to file for their trademarks, submit those trademark filings, get in brand registry. And then, within like a week of that filing, we knocked off 27 out of the 30 infringing parties just through brand registry processes. So they're another type of quick win that we can do when we go into these types of companies.
I like this idea of quick wins because many times when you think anything legal, you're thinking of in terms of like, well, here's the cost or here's what I'm doing to like protect myself, which sounds important, but it also sounds like spending a lot of money for a maybe. But if you say, hey, we can go in on Amazon and clear up all of these knockoffs, or if we can, get this moved over from Shopify to Amazon, that sounds great, right? You see some tangible results, you see some bang for your buck at work. And when you talk about some of this, like jumping into these accounts, it's great to hear because definitely not all attorneys, but sometimes you feel like these attorneys are like old school, right? You feel like they've barely heard of the internet or they're not that technologically savvy. And so kind of speaking to that, like how do you guys stand out when, you can go to all kinds of intellectual property attorneys and there's all sorts of choices, and there's also like what can you afford, who will return your call, but there's also like the services they provide. So how are you guys unique? How do you stand out?
Yeah, there's two ways that I think we stand out. One, as I've worked with other patent attorneys over time, I've found that when you go to them, there's a lack of clarity in the scope of work that's being offered. Hey, I want a patent. Okay, that's 12, 15, $20,000, whatever it is. What do you get for that? Nobody knows. What we've done on our team is to try to make this very transparent, very accessible. And we've broken it down into packages. You want the basic package, the plus package, or the premium package? We tell you what's involved, the scope of each one, what's not involved in some of them, and then we give you a recommendation for your situation. After a short brief call, we can say, your situation, you probably want our plus, or you might need our basic, or this is definitely a premium for these reasons. So we really try to provide a fully transparent scope of services, which I just don't see other law firms doing that. That might not sound like a big difference when you look at it outside the legal world, because I think a lot of people outside the legal world already do this. But as you mentioned, within the legal profession, there are a lot of people who just, my hourly rate's $600 an hour, and we'll get you a trademark, and they don't tell you anything, what's involved in it. So we've tried to be really transparent and upfront about that. The other thing is, again, from a standpoint, it's kind of like, well, how do we highlight this difference? And that is our fractional legal team. We operate as if we're the guys down the hall, the guys and gals down the hall. You pop your head in, and we want you to come to us. We want you to ask us questions. We're not here to make communication difficult. I've always been fascinated that the legal industry is all about making money on time. I don't like that model, but that's what a lot of it is. Make money on time, people hire you. But then we make it so difficult for people to communicate with us and hire us because we charge them for the phone calls that they should be bringing to us so that we can identify the work that needs to be done. And what we've ended up with is a system where people don't call us. And then once they do call us, they want to talk about a very, very narrow issue because they don't want the call to go off the rails. They don't want to tell us about the other 10 issues that they might need help with too. They only have
Sure.
budget for a 15-minute phone call. And all we hear about, if we do that, is one single issue. We don't hear the whole context. We don't hear how it fits into the roadmap. And we don't hear about the other 10 problems that are going unresolved for who knows how long. And so we want, and we've designed our team very deliberately and our communications with our clients, we want our clients to come to us and feel like, hey, I can just poke my head in Jeff's, virtual office door for a minute if I need to, ask a quick question, and then we all stay informed. We all stay really aligned. And I don't think that the majority of the legal profession is working that way.
And they need to, and it's a lot of good ideas in general, as far as you have this clear scope. That way the expectations are established up front. You know what's involved, you know what's not involved, and you combine that with the more responsive communication that you're talking about, so that way there's more of the bigger picture. And that way, if there's an issue, you're like, okay, well, there's this issue, but we also know that there's these other things that are related later on.
Mhm.
And so I like hearing about that. It's really cool that you have like this fractional legal team model to kind of have your cake and eat it too, right? It's like having someone down the hall, but it's not like having someone like full time who you may be paying even if they're not doing any sort of work for you. And then as far as like what I'm not asking, that's always interesting to think about, right? You and I just met, so I definitely don't know all the ins and out about your business or about this fractional legal team idea. And so, speaking to that, is there a missing hidden question in this conversation? Is there something I should be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you.
Uh, that's a great question. I think that the question that people should be asking is how do we integrate our legal counsel into our business strategy? Because people aren't doing that for a lot of the reasons I mentioned. So the way so that would be the question. Should they and how do they do that? I believe the answer is absolutely yes, because your legal counsel, we've seen if we've been in the right places during our career, we've seen so many of these issues already play out. You know, the first time founders, they're gung ho, they just push forward, they're selling, they're bringing in some revenue, and they're kind of breaking things in the process. Second time founders don't necessarily operate that same way. They're a little bit more deliberate. They're able to do that kind of fast and slow balance that you mentioned earlier, a little more intuitively, and also with the help of a network that they put around them, advisors, finance advisors, legal advisors, and they're able to know when to go to those advisors and lean on them for um, not just expert advice in their field, but maybe a broader perspective generally on some of the business issues. And there are some really, really, really good attorneys out there who know the legal field inside and out and also know business extremely well. And I think there are opportunities for people to bring those smart business minded attorneys into their business much more, not just integrated for legal functions, but integrated for business functions.
So there's two important lessons that I'm making sure to make a mental note that I'm hearing from you here. One is how important the people are, right? That there's always this thought of like, well, if only I thought better or had better ideas. But then you say, well, your one person's thinking only gets you so far. You need other people on your team, including these legal minds. And the other sort of subtext I'm getting from your answer is like you mentioned about there's kind of the first time business and second time business. It's almost like first kid versus second kid, or like having your own kids versus having grandkids, right? You make all these mistakes, and then the next go around, you're like, hey, this time I might do this differently. And so that's worth thinking about, and maybe even studying what the second and third time business owners are doing, like how they're establishing things the proper way, when maybe they perhaps have more resources because they maybe sold company number one and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
now we're going to do it right, and we're going to save ourselves shortcut so many of the headaches, such as getting the fractional legal team on board, getting that IP locked down, getting the documentation figured out, and getting whatever kind of compliance, playing by the rules is needed for whatever playground that their business is currently playing in. And so, as far as some next steps here, I'm curious about what kind of a client is right for you and your company, and if they are right, then where should they go? What are some next steps?
Yeah, I love how you summarized all of that. Our clients really are, as I mentioned, innovators, right? They're building a new brand that didn't exist. They're building a new product that didn't exist. They're bringing a dream into the world that never existed. They have passion for that, and we have passion with them on those things, and love to work collaboratively. So our clients tend to be e-commerce clients launching new products and selling them, SaaS clients who are launching new service-based platforms that we can help to get out there and protect. And so SaaS and e-commerce, and then we also have this field. Maybe it's a lingering piece of me from my earlier really patent heavy days, and those are what I call the deep research guys. They're the PhDs building new technology for 20 years out based on government grant funding, and we're helping them navigate that process from a patent and business standpoint. Those are maybe the three areas that we tend to be most focused on. And then tangentially, we get some referrals to related companies in those fields. But it's really the innovators building a brand, building a product that come to us and ask questions. We're a great team for that. People will also find us on LinkedIn. That you can see me on LinkedIn. But a lot of our new clients, our new connections will come and they'll do an actual 30-minute free strategy call with me, because I love to talk to innovators. I love to hear what's happening. I love to hear what you're creating, and I love to hear what you're breaking. And there's a lot to be discussed in those fields. So we'll do in 30 minutes. We'll start to cover what is business strategy. How does it actually apply to your business? What's your business? What are your business milestones of the next 12 to 18 months, and how does the legal fit into that over time? So my website is intellectualstrategist.com, and that's where people can actually see my calendar, sign up for that free strategy call if they want to.
Very nice. Exciting possibilities to kind of harness the lightning in the bottle and say, hey, we built this SaaS, this brand, this product, we're innovating, we're breaking stuff. Well, maybe only break so much, right? Like it's okay to break a little bit, but don't break so much that you cripple your business. Or maybe it's time to get the help of Mr. Jeff Holman and his team at intellectualstrategies.com to maybe unbreak a few things here and there. So they are a fractional legal team for your growing business. They're a law firm who partners with founders, disruptors, and VC-backed growth companies in technology, e-commerce, and SaaS. And they bring that legal expertise to your team and strategic protection to your technology and brand. Jeff gave you the places to go. That was on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Holman, Holman. That's Jeff Holman on LinkedIn. Then the website, intellectualstrategies.com. You go there, you click on let's schedule a call, you have that 30-minute meeting and just figure out where you're at. Jeff loves this stuff, right? He eats, breathes, and sleeps the strategy. He loves the exciting breakneck pace of startups. But you also need to get some of this legal protection in place, both defensively and offensively. That way your company can succeed. That way you can keep your people, keep your money, keep your customers, sell the company someday, all those things that we want to do. You can't do it alone. You need help from Mr. Jeff Holman at intellectualstrategies.com. And before I let you go, Jeff, it's time for the scary part of the show where I try to stump you and I ask you for a fun quote or lesson that has served you in business or in life. So what do you have to pass on to us as far as a fun quote or lesson?
I don't want to be overly simplistic about this, but if I could leave one thing with the people I talk with, it's the same thing I adopted 10 or 12 years ago, and that is innovate with confidence. That's maybe a little short for a mind-blowing quote, but innovating with confidence just means so much to me because the innovation is important and the confidence is important, and moving forward with confidence is, if there's a way that we could, I look at my kids, I'm like, if I can increase their confidence, that's maybe the biggest thing I can do as a father for them, help make them confident people. And with my clients, if I can increase their confidence, I feel a little bit the same way. Like that's a huge boost for them so that they know how to make decisions more confidently than they maybe were doing without my advice. And so just innovate with confidence is what I would say there.
And that's a great value to have, right? This value of confidence, because there's so much built into it. There's the implied certainty and experience and optimism. So we could all use that sort of advice in business and in life. Confidence, especially innovating with confidence. And you can get Jeff's help innovating with confidence at intellectualstrategies.com, and we'll see you there. That way you can have that low key, easy conversation and just talk about how things the way that things have gotten, right? Maybe there's those skeletons to be dealt with. That's okay. You're seeking help now. Have that conversation. Jeff has seen all this sort of stuff, so don't be embarrassed and tell him what the situation is, because like we said at the beginning, it doesn't make any sense to like do all this overly cautious legal stuff first and then innovate. Like you built the company to where it is. Now it's time to clean up the mess. Intellectualstrategies.com. Jeff Holman, wonderful speaking with you.
It's been my pleasure, Robert. Thanks so much.